Well, look, Donald Trump recapturing the White House was never going to be a fun ride, but the appointments he has made should frankly be considered terrifying, both for the impact they will have on Americans, including many of those who voted for him, and the people of Palestine, which is what I'll focus on, given the central role of the United States in facilitating that genocide. Now, Trump understandably feels emboldened. He not only won 312 votes in the Electoral College compared to 226 for Kamala Harris, he's also the first Republican presidential candidate to win a higher share of the popular vote than his Democratic opponent. And so far, it looks like he's going to be just under 50% of the overall popular vote. So he didn't actually win a majority of those who actually voted. We'll talk about the question turnout and who didn't vote in videos to come. But nonetheless, he won this victory while clearly peddling more extreme and vengeful rhetoric than he did last time, surrounded by more menacing individuals. That triumphalism is reflected in the extreme nature of the people he's appointed. In this carnival of horrors, let's begin with Mike Huckabee, the Republican former governor of Arkansas, who ran for the presidential Republican nomination in 2008 and 2016. He's on the hardcore religious right. That matters because in the United States, it is evangelical Christians, not Jewish Americans, by quite a distance, who are the most hardcore cheerleaders for Israel and indeed its most extreme elements. Indeed, a poll a few months ago found that 30% of Jewish Americans thought Israel was committing genocide, rising to 40% among the under 45s. Not so with right-wing evangelical Christians. Now, Trump has proposed Mike Huckabee as the new US ambassador to Israel. Let's start with this video from 2008.
Palestinian state that it doesn't have to be in Israel.
Yeah.
So what do you think about it? What should have been?
And basically, I mean, there really is no such thing as, and I have to be careful in saying this because people will really get upset. There's really no such thing as a Palestinian. There's not.
Before 1948, there was all Arabs. European. I mean, it was
Arabs and Persians. You don't. You know, and there's such complexity within that. There's really no such thing. That's been a political tool to try to force land away from Israel. Well, my point is, if that's the issue, if it's real estate, if you look at a map and say, here's how much Israel has, and here's how much the Arab states hold, there's plenty of land for them to have. You know, let them take it out of Egypt, let them take it out of Syria, let them take it out of Jordan. There are plenty of places for this to be without sacrificing the Golan Heights, which would be suicide. Utter suicide. And what worries me is, I mean, we've got to respect Israel's decisions to self-govern, but when I hear some of their leaders talking about giving up the Golan Heights, I'm thinking, tell me.
There is no such thing as a Palestinian, he says. Well, let's be clear, that is genocidal in its implications as a perspective. He uses that to justify illegal annexation and indeed ethnic cleansing. He's even here criticising Israeli leaders at the time for not being extreme enough in their treatment of the Palestinians. What he's suggesting here is Palestinians, many of whom have already been driven from their land in 1948 in particular and in 1967 and indeed on other occasions, not least in Gaza today, should be permanently expelled. Saying they should go to other Arab countries is like saying we should expel, I don't know, French people to Germany or Italy because they're all European. I mean, I don't know why I'm even trying to rationalise these comments, given they are, of course, so extreme. Next, from 2017.
There is no such thing as a West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. There's no such thing as a settlement. They're communities, they're neighborhoods, they're cities. There's no such thing as an occupation.
He says here there's no such thing as the West Bank, there's Judea and Samaria, which is the biblical term used to justify expelling Palestinians from their homes on the grounds that it has been given by God to the Jewish people. He then says, contrary to what international law firmly adjudicates, there is no such thing as an occupation and dismisses the idea of settlements, which are completely illegal under international law, being what they are, instead calling them communities. Well, you know, if someone stole his land and illegally settled people there, I doubt he'd be calling those communities. As for the idea of no occupation, the West Bank has been subjected to the longest belligerent occupation in modern history. At this point, what do you even say other than, is this dude sniffing glue? What does he think the armed presence of Israeli soldiers is imposed against the will of 3 million Palestinians in the West Bank? Let's hear this one, shall we?
But there is something else about Israel that I believe mirrors that of the history of the United States. I do not believe that it is possible to understand, to even comprehend the United States of America without believing that it involved the providence of God. And I do not believe that it is possible for anybody to look at the remarkable, stunning history not only of ancient Israel, but of the modern nation of Israel, and somehow believe that that could be without the providence and the hand of Almighty God. There is simply no other explanation. I am one who believes, and this is not a political view, this is deeply personal, and whether I'm in politics or not, I still hold this view. I held it when I was a teenager. I held it long before I ever got into politics, and 100 years from now, I will still hold it. In a different citizenship, no doubt, 100 years from now. And it's this belief that though we may break many of our promises to God, He never breaks His promises to us. Never, ever, ever. And for those of you who embrace and believe in the Bible, and I would assume that most of you in the RJC do, then I would have to say that I affirm the reality of Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. God says those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. That's either true or it is not. I believe it is true.
Oh, we've really got a live one, haven't we, guys? He's a Christian fundamentalist, sure, who believes God justifies expelling indigenous people from their lands and murderously stealing that land. Interestingly, that includes the expulsion of Christian Palestinians. I mean, what does he think about that? Does he think it's the Christian God's will that Christian Palestinians were driven en masse from their homes in 1948 and not 1947? Is that what he thinks? Does he think the Christian Palestinians who've been killed in Gaza today, does he think that's God's will? I'd be interested to know. He also believes that if you oppose, I don't know, Israel's policies of apartheid, colonization, ethnic cleansing, and genocide, then you will be cursed by God. Well, I'm not a believer. I do strongly believe in respecting the religious beliefs of others, which I know can play a really important role in many people's lives and even spur them on to help others. But if such a God existed, I would clearly regard him not as a God, but as some sort of devil. Now, after being nominated as ambassador, he repeated this view.
As you well know, I've never been willing to use the term West Bank. There is no such thing. I speak of Judea and Samaria. I tell people there is no occupation. It is a land that is occupied by the people who have had a rightful deed to the place for 3,500 years, since the time of Abraham. So a lot of the terms that maybe the media would use, or even people against Israel would use, are not terms that I employ, because I want to use terms that live from time immemorial. And those are the terms like Promised Land and Judea, Samaria. These are biblical terms. And those are important to me. And so I will continue to follow that nomenclature unless I'm instructed otherwise, but I don't think that'll happen.
Well, this is a Manichaean view, and one with hideous potential consequences. If you believe those who support the right of Palestinian national self-determination are cursed by God, then that will clearly have a major impact on how you will behave towards them. Just a little note here, this underlines how zealous support of Israel and believing in the innate equality and security of Jewish people don't go together. You see, the biblical prophecy Huckabee believes in is that all Jews must return to Israel, because that will then hasten the return of Jesus Christ and bring about Judgment Day, in other words, the apocalypse, and that Jewish people will then either convert to Christianity or face extermination. Lovely stuff. And to think it's those who think Jewish people should just have equal rights and security wherever they live, to be equal human beings, to be protected and not face, I don't know, divine extermination. They're the ones who get smeared as anti-Semitic. Cool. It's enough to make you want to blaspheme, isn't it? Next up, Pete Hegseth, a Fox News presenter and Trump's pick for defense secretary. Well, he's another far-right Christian zealot with tattoos pointing to hardcore Christian nationalism, such as a Jerusalem cross on his chest, as well as Daus Vult, God wills it, which is a battle cry of the First Crusade. It is, as experts say, a call for religious violence. He wrote in his 2020 book, American Crusade, that Muslims plan to outbreed native, in inverted quotes, Americans, and that the United States faces a cultural invasion, that Christians should fight like 11th century Crusaders. That's a curious comparison, given the Crusaders were murderously invading foreign lands. He wants to release US soldiers accused of war crimes. He believes so-called woke generals have left the military weak and effeminate and questioned women having combat roles. He was also investigated for alleged sexual assault in 2017. Now, let's hear his views on Israel and Palestine.
And today, Jennifer and I and others had a chance to go see the Western Wall of the Temple Mount, the Western Wall tunnels, so much of the old city. And as you stand there, you can't help but behold the miracle before you. And it got me thinking about another miracle that I hope all of you don't see too far away. Because 1917 was a miracle. 1948 was a miracle. 1967 was a miracle. 2017, the declaration of Jerusalem as the capital was a miracle. And there's no reason why the miracle of the reestablishment of the temple on the Temple Mount is not possible. I don't know how it would happen. You don't know how it would happen, but I know that it could happen. That's all I know. And a step in that process, a step in every process, is the recognition that facts and activities on the ground truly matter. And that's why going and visiting Judea and Samaria, understanding that sovereignty, the very sovereignty of Israeli soil, Israeli cities, locations, is a critical next step to showing the world that this is the land for Jews and the land of Israel. And I believe, as was mentioned, he said you need to, what was mentioned is you need to buy the ticket. Don't just wish for 40 years to win the lottery, buy the ticket. I would submit to you, in light of the support you have in Washington, D.C., the support you have amongst patriotic Americans, amongst evangelical Christians, amongst believers, amongst Republicans, even amongst some Democrats who can barely say it anymore in Washington. Buy the ticket, take your action, do what needs to be done here in Israel, because I truly believe this is a moment where America will have your back. You have Donald Trump in the White House, you have Mike Pence as vice president, you have Nikki Haley at the UN, you have true believers in Israel and America that have your back.
Then there's Mike Waltz, a Republican politician he has picked as national security advisor. Let's have a listen.
President Trump has been the best president for Israel and for the Middle East in our lifetime. And let's take America back and let's stand shoulder to shoulder with the greatest ally we've ever known, the state of Israel, as we fight evil all over the world.
Best president for Israel. Israel is the best ally the US has ever had, and so on. Not much to subtlety here, is there? Then there's Steve Witkoff, a real estate advisor with no apparent foreign policy expertise, appointed as Trump's special envoy to the Middle East. He has spent vast sums of money supporting pro-Israel causes and raising money specifically for the Israeli military. When Biden did the barest of minimum, pausing the shipment of £2,000 bombs which have been used to slaughter so many Palestinian civilians, the New York Times reports Witkoff used that as a fundraising opportunity for Trump and has lauded Trump as the strongest and most vocal supporter of Israel in generations. Then there's Marco Rubio, US Republican senator for Florida, portrayed as the most moderate of this lot, who back in March was recorded being challenged over his opposition to a ceasefire in Gaza.
They're murdering civilians, they're starving the population.
No, Hamas should surrender.
You cannot, sir, you cannot,
Hamas,
it's not justified.
You're
it's not
taping this, right?
Correct.
Hamas should surrender so that the people there could stop suffering because of them. It's all Hamas.
Sir, this is not true. It does not.
If Hamas lays down their weapons, the fighting
That
stops.
does not justify 32,000 dead, a starvation, a famine.
That's a lie.
It's not, sir, no, you are lying right now. You are lying. You're supporting genocide.
Well, that is the view, of course, that whatever war crimes Israel commits, then it's Hamas's fault, which gives Israel carte blanche to behave as it so wishes. He also there falsely claims that the number killed has been inflated when actually all the evidence points to it being much, much higher. The evidence is, I'm afraid, overwhelming. Trump's administration will be viciously pro-genocide. It will let Israel do exactly what it wants when it comes to the genocide being committed against the Palestinian people. Now, some will go, well, maybe people shouldn't have been so hard on Joe Biden and Kamala Harris when the alternative is so much worse. Let's be clear. That administration facilitated genocide and is still facilitating genocide. They're still in power. And Biden will go down in history, accordingly, as a monster. It was under Biden that Gaza was wiped from the face of the earth, and some of the most depraved and extreme crimes of our age were committed. What may well have happened is those crimes will continue. What may well happen is those crimes may continue, but without the occasional empty hand-wringing we saw before. But take the West Bank, which faces being formally annexed and recognised as such under Trump. But the West Bank is already de facto annexed. The fact is, the US political establishment are all guilty. All of them must be held to account. But there's no question that renewed horrors now face the Palestinian people, and we must never go silent about that. By the way, if you're on Blue Sky, the social media platform I've joined, I'm just Owen Jones there, one word. I'm going to keep on using Twitter, though for now, given it still reaches a large and important audience, not least, for example, on the question of genocide, despite it being taken over by an obnoxious far-right billionaire. Please like and subscribe, leave your comments, your thoughts, help us all together take on this dire media landscape. Patreon.com/OwenJones84. Listen to the podcast, I'll speak to you soon.